All right, here we go. So there was a lot of great tributes to my dad. I think you got a sense of the type of person he was. So the way I'm going to do it, to give you perspective, is I'm going to tell you some stories. And the first story I have is I want to tell you about my dad, the badass. Okay. So back in middle school, I would ride home on my bike. Yeah, see, my family knows this story. I would ride home on my bike with my friend Eric. We just came back from soccer practice. It was at night, and we got surrounded by these kids on their bikes. And they surrounded us, and then they surrounded my friend Eric. And then one of the kids started punching him in the face. Not too hard, but still, it was like, dude, what's happening? I'm freaking out, right? After a few minutes of that, they let us go. And then my friend Eric's like, don't worry about it, dude. Like, you know, that kid, like, we played him in basketball, we beat him, and we talked crap. And he just got upset about it, that's all, right? Don't worry about it. But, you know, I'm in middle school, I'm freaking out, I'm crying. So I go home and tell my dad, Dad, oh my God, we got assaulted by these kids, like crying to him, right? And my dad's like, oh yeah? All right, let's go. So he grabs my Uncle Vic. They grab some bats. And they're like, let's go to the car. So here they are to walk into the car, you know, with their baseball bats, cigarettes hanging out of their mouth. And in the back of my head, I'm like, damn, my uncle and dad are badasses. You know, in the back of my head, you know, I'm still freaking out. So the intent was, we're gonna drive around the street looking for these kids, okay? So we're in the car, and then, you know, we pull up to one kid, not him, not one of the kids, okay? And my dad's pointing out from the car, is that him? Is that the guy? And the kid is like freaking out, like, what's happening? And then, you know, I'm like, Dad, it's not him, I promise. Can we leave him alone now, please? So, you know, needless to say, we didn't find any of them. We went back to Eric's house. My dad talked to his dad. And then, for whatever reason, one of those kids was across the street. And then my dad got a look at him. And then he said, dang, that kid is bigger than I am. But hey, I guess that's what the bats are for, right? So, if there's any takeaway from that story, is that don't mess with his family. He will literally go to bat for us. So, my second story is, I want to tell you, you heard a little bit about this, but my dad, the activist. If you know anything about my dad on Facebook, he posted a lot of political stuff. And it was, you know, political stuff about what's happening in the homeland, the Philippines. You know, he's very, you know, he cares a lot about what's going on over there. And a little backstory on that, my dad in his youth grew up with a dictator named Ferdinand Marcos. He hated Marcos. He hated the entire Marcos family. And he would demonstrate and go to rallies and, you know, fight against the power, basically. To a point where he even got arrested and put in jail for it. And I'm very proud to tell this story, and I'll tell you why. You know, in one of our heart-to-hearts, the few that we had, he told me, you know, just people don't understand me. Like, I'm sitting in jail, and my mom is telling me, like, can you not do this? Like, can you not be put in jail? Leave Marcos alone, it's fine. You know, his family was saying the same thing. Just leave it alone, right? Don't get in trouble. But that's not my dad. Like, he gets into trouble. Like, you know, he will fight for what he believes in. And if there's any takeaway on that story, it's that, you know, if you can take inspiration from my dad, if there's a cause, if there's a belief that you have, you know, that's worth fighting for, stand up and fight for it. It's worth it. So, and my last story, one very near and dear to my heart. So my dad had a stroke in February. He had trouble, you know, using his right arm, his right leg, and he had aphasia, which, you know, he had trouble speaking. I'm not going to tell you the story about how I pushed him on a wheelchair and decided my good idea to, you know, walk him around the perimeter of the hospital, because I wanted to give him a different view. And then I almost lost control of the wheelchair to where he almost hit a parked car, but he didn't. It's fine, he didn't. I got control of the wheelchair. I'm not going to tell you the story about how afterwards when we got up to the room and he wanted to get back on bed. Usually we get help from the nurses. But he got tired of waiting 10, 20 minutes. They weren't showing up. So he just kind of looked at me like, come on, let's go. So, he ended up face down on the bed, one leg on the bed, the other leg out. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do, Dad? So I'm not going to tell you those stories, even though I just told you those stories. The one I'm going to really tell you about is, in between that time, I rolled him out to a seating area outside the hospital. So I parked him next to a bench. I sat down on the bench. And hello. We sat down, and I remember I took in that moment, right? And I didn't say anything to him. Obviously, he couldn't say anything. But we just sat there together. And I remember I looked at the sky, I felt the wind, and I just really lived in that moment with my dad. And so I'm telling you this story because my dad, I want to tell you about the fact that, he's the dad that, he's more than enough. We didn't need to say anything that day to each other. Just the fact that we were there in each other's presence, that was more than enough for me. Didn't need no words, no other actions, just there with him in that moment. And eventually he points up, go back to the room, okay, cool. But yeah, I'll always remember that moment. So thank you so much for listening to my stories. Really appreciate it. If there's anybody else that would like to say a few words, I would like to invite you now to come up and speak.